All right. Well, welcome to week 2, James. This is going to be our 6-week study of James, titled James, asking and receiving. Because like I said last week, the scariest part of James is a question and ask and receiving discussion that we're going to have. But that's in a couple weeks because James specifically addresses asking and receiving things from the Lord 3 times. So we're going to do a little study into the first one this time. Okay, so my thoughts are, of course, fabulous. If I do this right, we're gonna say some things at the beginning, and then it's gonna seem like I go off on a bunch of different tangents, but it's all gonna come back together in the end. And if I failed at that, then it'll just be tangents, but hopefully they'll be interesting. So James chapter 1, specifically verses 2 through 9, but we're going to be all throughout the whole chapter today, is our first case study. It's that 2 through 9 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do." So this seems like it's a pretty important teaching to understand, because if you want to get things from the Lord, you need to not be double-minded and unstable in all you do, right? We need to know about this. So, all right, let's think together for a little while. Okay, ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. What is it? Whatever I ask, that is not what this text says. It says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and based on the sentence meaning wisdom, will be given to you. So just let's point that out. God does not promise us in this specific verse anything but the fact that he will give us wisdom if we ask for it. That if we lack it and we go to him for it, he'll give us. Okay, all right. Without finding fault. Why does it say without finding fault? Does anybody have a thought? Why might it say that? We might need a mic for comments if people feel all inspired. Why does it say without finding fault? Yeah, God's never going to hold it against us for asking for things. Say, no, you naughty child, how dare you even ask me? He's never going to do that. Yes. My quippy answer is, why does it say without finding fault? Because there is fault to be found. And we know that. I think all humans are born with, I think psychologists will tell you, even secular psychologists, humans are born with a lack. We lack. We need to be filled up. We need to be spoken into. So we're going to need things. And if you can't go to the source of the thing you need to get what you need, that's a humongous problem. And the fact is that there is a fault to be found when we go to ask him for things, right? We should that feeling of, oh, he's going to kill me. Yeah, he deserves to. You should. You're a sinner. Wrong, bad, 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 wrong. But that's why it tells us he's not going to find that fault. He's not dealing with it. So I think that's important. We also just ask for wrong stuff, and we do it poorly, and we do it selfishly all the time. So not only do we have to do it and we don't deserve to, but we're going to do it very, very poorly. And we need to know we're not going to get a smack when we go. And I think that's why it tells us without finding fault. All right, so exactly what will be given? What's Mona said. When you read this, if you read it quickly and all growing up in the church with James, you don't really focus on the fact that it says wisdom. You kind of just blow right by that and think, if I ask rightly, God will give me what I want. And all of a sudden, you're doing magic, not prayer. Because magic is a transaction. Magic is saying to whatever power in the world, I pay this price for this service. That's magic. And we can get very, very confused here easily because it's saying if you do this, you'll get that. Okay, did the Bible just give me a spell? Think of a vending machine. Yeah, Doc says think of a vending machine. Exactly. Did God just give me like the coordinates on the vending machine for anything I want? I just hit A4 and the guy's got to give it to me. Is that what just happened? I don't think so. But that's why last week I talked a little bit about all the different ways to think about the concept believe. So what is believing? What I think believing is going to dictate how I respond to this advice. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt. So if I think believing is agreeing with, if I think believing means yes, like I believe in diets, if I think of it like that, because diets exist, of course, but if I don't believe in diets, that means I don't think it's a good way, right? So if I think believe works like that, then when it says believe, I'm going to go like this. This is what I'm going to do to prepare. I'm going to go like this. Ready? I'm going to go. I'll just try to believe harder so that God will give me what I want. You know what I mean? But that's not what it is. Okay. But that's okay. What is believe? What does it mean then? So if I need to go to him and I can go to him because he's not going to be mad about it. He's not going to be mad if I do it wrong. He's not going to be mad that I'm doing it at all because I'm a big fat sinner because I totally am. But he already told me that's fine. That's fine. Come ask me anyways. Okay, fine. When I ask, what do I have to do? I have to believe and not doubt. Well, okay. All right. Well, let's check this out. I think this tells us 3 things about what it means to believe in this area. So it says, ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Okay, so first thing, ask God who gives generously to all. If you're walking around giving lollipops, and I tell a kid, hey, go ask Lawrence for a lollipop. He loves to give them to the children. Is that child going to automatically assume that Lawrence is physically unable to hand him a lollipop? No, by definition, he knows he can't because he's doing it. He's out there doing it. So ask God who gives. He's doing it. He's done it. This is a thing he's known that we know he can do it. So it tells us he can do it. Okay. Without finding fault. He does not have to do that. That's only happening because he wants to. So he can do it and he wants to do it. Third thing, and it will be given to you and he will do it. He can, he wants to, he will. Okay, check this out. So what if I assume believe and not doubt means to behave as though I think he can, wants to, and will? What? Okay, listen to it. Listen to the sentence when I changed out the word believe for that, and it helps me a lot. Okay, so I'm asking a lot. I'm trying to believe really hard. What am I supposed to do? Okay, read it like this. But when you ask, you must behave as though he can, wants to, and will, because the one who doubts, because the one who does not behave like he can, wants to, as will, is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord because they have behaved counter to their request. What if it works like that? What if I say, dear Lord, please bless this food to the nourishment of my body and make me strong and skinny and powerful for you. And then I eat tater tots. I have behaved against my request, right? He has given me information about what's good for me. And then I do the opposite, but ask him to make it cause the thing he promised me in the first place. That's insanity. Maybe it works like that. Maybe it's not magic. And that's why I have to believe and not doubt, because the behavior of belief, of behaving as though he can, wants to, and will, is the mechanism through which the gift he promised is given. And therefore, if I don't do that, I don't get the gift, but not because it was magic, not because it was a transaction, but because that's the vehicle through which the gift was coming, and I didn't engage with it. Right? Okay. So I think believe means to behave as though he can, he wants to, and he will. Do whatever it is that he said. In this case, give wisdom when it's lacking. Okay. All right. So that's the believe part. So it says the person must believe and not doubt. I think that's what believe means, I think. Okay. So, and not doubt. All right. We're going to start spreading through a little bit more of James. So if you'll let me, I'm going to read some of this again. Okay, so consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. At the end of that paragraph, who does it feel like in your guts is doing these trials to you? Huh? Who does it feel like? You can't be wrong at how you feel. The Lord. It feels like the Lord is doing them because it promised a good through them. Yeah. So, okay. So I go through this, I read this, and it didn't say God is going to bring trials so that. That's not what it says, but that's where my mind went immediately. Okay. So I'm reading it. Okay. I keep going. And then I hit this part and I kind of get a mental clash. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Who in that paragraph does it feel like is doing the trials to you? The devil. Satan, not God. It said not God. It said not God. Right? It said not God. Okay. Let's see. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. And consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials. Trials and tempting. That word is the same-ish in Greek, Hebrew, whatever language they wrote it in. It's the same. It's one off. So in the app, that you look at, and you can let the language info, all the words are numbered. Right. So if there's like a variation of words, their numbers are right next to each other. And in doubt, up in verse 2 is word 1252, and trials is word 1253. So they're really related to each other. So it says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. And I dug into this word because I was like, what's the difference? Who's doing it? Is God doing one of them? Is he doing none of them? Who do I blame for this? Do I blame no one? How does this work? I don't know how to think about this. So, yeah, because I want to know who to blame. I don't know why. Anyways, this is why I'm digging through this. And listen, okay, denoting separation, to distinguish, decide, judge, to separate thoroughly, completely, to separate oneself from. I don't know if you'll remember this, but I've been hammering on the fact that holiness and completeness have something to do with one another. And I just think that definition is fascinating, understanding that, because if that's true, that completeness is a key aspect of holiness somehow, then to separate yourself from something you're supposed to be with is to make yourself incomplete. And if incomplete is not holy, then that's to make yourself unholy. So that just seems to really fit. I like it. I like how that's going along in my thought process. Okay. Yeah, separate oneself from. So we talked about that he can, wants to, and will, and therefore the behave as though. So because I think it's through the behavior that he gives the wisdom. And this is why we must not separate ourselves. We must not doubt. And I think the way that we separate ourselves in this way, you must believe and not doubt. You must be whole, not incomplete, is kind of how I hear that. And the way that works is we can be whole, we can be joined, we can be united. Our intellectual understanding of the truth and our behaved out understanding of the truth. Humans can separate themselves into two halves, their intellectual understanding and their behaved understanding of the truth. And that's what all of James is going to tell you not to do. Don't do that. Because to separate your intellectual understanding from the truth from your behaved out understanding of the truth. Yeah. All of James is going to tell you to do that. All of James 16 through 18. Don't be deceived. Deception, huge theme in James, which I also think means being tricked into separating yourself into halves that you are not you're not a half, you're a whole. Things are meant to be together. You can't just separate them. Don't be deceived. My dear brothers and sisters, every good is and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we may be a kind of first fruits of all he created. So when he tells us to do something, it's true. He's given us the truth to work with. It's as if he made reality, all of it, right? Made it. And then he put it right here, and it's a machine, and it's right there. Like a car, like how I deal with a car. I don't know how a car works, but I can kind of work the car because someone else told me how. That's what reality is. It's bigger than us. We don't know how it works. We don't know what the levers mean. Oh, and also we're trapped inside that machine. And if we take a wrong step, we might get squished by a gear, or, it's a dangerous machine, and we have to trust the person who's in it, and who made it, knows what's going on. And if they tell us what to do, it's the truth. But if we agree with it and don't do it, it's not helpful. So we cannot separate those parts of ourselves. So being people of the truth means behaving as though the truth is true, and that God can, wants to, and will give us what is needed for perfection. Okay. I feel like I kind of get that. Fine. But does that all mean that we didn't even all the way finish talking? There's just too much to say. Okay. So the two trial words. In the beginning, it sounds like God's doing it. And in that later bit, it sounded like the devil was doing it. I should be happy about trials, but I shouldn't be upset that God's tempting me when other what does that really mean? Does it boil down to, if I understood it correctly, does that mean that nothing is allowed to make me sad? Because as soon as a trial shows up, I have to consider it pure joy. What does this mean? How do I use this? But the only thing I can come up with on the whole different trials things is, if I were wanting you to fail, one strategy I might do is to point out how you're not good at it. Right. I might put you in a position to trip in front of the whole class or something ridiculous, right? I might put an obstacle before you. I might test you so that you are weakened when you see the result of it. I might do that. But a good teacher would never do that. A good teacher teaches you so that sometimes, I can imagine with a human teacher and the Lord, they're a little different, the results, but I think the Lord teaches us so that sometimes, so we can see what we can do with his power, but most of the time so that we can see what he can do. So a test, whether it's good or bad, really depends on who's testing you and why, more than all the others. So it does seem like there's things that evil sends. James seems to be pretty clear about that. When you are tempted, when temptation comes after you, God didn't do that. It didn't really say if he caused the trials or not. It just said when they come. So interesting thought. Okay, moving on. Okay. All right. Alrighty. So, are we never allowed to be sad? A trial comes, maybe the devil sent it, but the God's going to make something good come out of it. So really backwards thinking, I'm never allowed to be sad because it always ends up good. Is that how that works? I don't think so. Two things are true at the same time, though, and that's why it seems like there's a conflict. Hey, what's up, guys? So two things are true at the same time. What are these things? Number one, bad things are bad. I think the Bible teaches us pretty clearly that the bad things are bad. If you want to know how upset God is about the bad things, you just go look at that cross story. All that was to fix things that he thought were unacceptable, because bad things are bad. So that's true. Second thing, that's true. We have a good father who disciplines us. That's also true. Jonathan Edwards has a famous quote. I didn't look it up because I remember it, so it might be a word or two off. You may recognize it. Nothing is unnecessary that he sends, and nothing can be necessary that he withholds, which is a difficult truth. I think it's true. I think I agree with him. But we don't have enough info to know why God is sending or withholding the thing, so we don't get to see if we agree. So believe cannot mean I agree, because you do not have enough information to know that you would agree, right? We can't know that. That's not what believe means. Believe means to think that he can, wants to, and will do whatever he said. Sometimes that's give wisdom. Sometimes it's bring the best and work all of it for our ultimate good. Okay. And so we don't have enough information to know, so we just have to trust him. We have to trust him to tell us how more than one thing that seems contradictory holds together. And that takes wisdom, which he says he will give without finding fault. So good news. It's what we need, and it's what he's going to give. Wisdom, knowing how to hold together more than one true thing at a time, is how I try to define that. Especially when those true things seem to contradict. So I told you about this machine that is reality, right? And we can know a few things about it. James tells us a few things about it. In James 1:16-18, it tells us that it produces only good gifts and the only good gifts. So when it makes things, it's only making good things. And there's no other place to get a good thing. It's the only one doing both of those, making only good and making good all the time. So don't be deceived or tricked into separating ourselves from him. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and say this part. So when I'm reading through James over and over and over again, I noticed one day, I was struck by how, because it's practical. It's cold. Do this. This is why. Do this. This is why. But then I was reading it one day and I noticed for me as a Western American woman, a tension in the theme, because it was just struck me at how intimate it was. It was intimate and reproductive. You put those two things together for an American, you automatically pop out sexual on the other end of it, which is not appropriate for what I'm saying, but it is intimate and it is reproductive. Listen for the innuendos. You're going to hear them the whole time now. Listen. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. And then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Do not be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceives yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forget what he looks like. But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard but doing it, they will be blessed by what they do. Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. Religion that our God and Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. So I hear it. I don't know that you hear it, but every action he's talking about makes something. He's talking about making something with every single thing. So everything produces something. It gives birth to something. And it was as if the Lord was telling me, what I asked James to tell you was to ask you to reproduce with me. Reproduce with me. No one else. Don't reproduce with the world. Don't put out into the world what you and the world will make together, because you're making something together. Make things with me. And the kind of things I want to make with you are looking after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep you from being polluted by the world. And there's a rhythm in James, like breathing in and out, where everything he says, he'll say a statement and then he'll tell you what that statement does or does not produce. He'll say, do this, it produces this. Don't do this, it produces this. But it's kind of subtle. And he doesn't tell you he's doing that. He just does it all throughout the book. It's very intimate and reproductive the whole time. He's asking you to make something, which I thought was just fascinating, because it's the opposite of what I associated with James all the time. But it's in there, even at the very beginning. If you understand that at the beginning and you're looking for making things, intimately with someone. I mean, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete. Again, none of this work is happening by itself. This work is happening by itself. That's that reproductive, intimate energy is going to be doing all of this, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must not believe, because the one who doubts is like a wave on the sea blown and tossed by the wind. I mean, that's just, and then if you add the adultery mix in there, because God uses adultery about sin all the time throughout the whole Bible. And if we're making things and we're viewing it as a make things with me, if that's what he's asking and over again. But when you ask, and you must believe and not doubt. Can you imagine going to your spouse for a hug, a kiss, and them going like, I don't know. That would hurt. That would hurt. You're trying to do an intimate thing with them. You're trying to intimately produce a life together. And for them to balk at you would hurt. And I think that's true of the Lord also with sin. Okay. So I kind of went out of order. Let me get my thoughts together here. I think that's why James talks a lot about speaking, because it's putting something out into the world and everything we say. Anyway, we'll get more of that later. Okay. So I have 3 things I think we learned. Let me make sure I said all of them. I think so. Okay. So I think the idea of perfection in James is a fascinating idea. A lot of commentators will tell you that James seems to think perfection is attainable now. You know what American Christianity teaches you? That it is not, that you cannot, that you cannot. Well, I mean, we also say that God is here and he can do anything, but we also say that he cannot make us perfect now. So that's a contradiction that has to be dealt with, and it's not an easy one. So I'm not saying I have the answer to that. I'm just pointing it out. Contradiction. So it's in the Bible, it's weird, and it's a weird that perfection is an interesting idea. So okay. So let's blur some ideas for a minute, just for the thought of a game, a thought exercise. Perfection and completion and holiness. I want to just blur all those together for a second, because you can't remove one from the other. Holiness is going to be perfect. It's going to be complete. You can't remove them. So let's all in one muddied concept. Okay. So let's ask ourselves at the end of this week that what we talked about, let's see. If holiness means only reproducing with the Lord, if holiness means behaving as though behaving as though he can, wants to, and will do whatever he says, and not being deceived into thinking that I can get or that there even is good anywhere else apart from him. If those 3 things are what holiness means, can we actually be holy now? I guess, and separately, do you agree with those 3 statements about holy? Do you think we can hold them as true? That holy is, while not limited to, while it is more than, it is certainly not less than, only reproducing with the Lord, behaving as though he can, wants to, and will do what he says, and not being deceived into thinking that there is good apart from him and that we can get it. Everybody's nodding at me, Zoomers. They think I'm a genius. Yes, kidding. Okay. Wow, seriously? Anybody? Oh, can we get the mic? Doesn't have to be important to be heard.
I was just going to say that if there's anything holy about us, it's from the Spirit of God. You know.
Yes.
That's all I was going to say.
Yes, there is. It's not in chapter 1, which is why. So I noticed this like reproductive theme throughout the whole book, but I was first slapped in the face with it on that section in chapter 1. There is a part, okay, where it says something about receiving the word that is planted in you because it will save you. And that seems to be what he's saying in that moment. He's saying, I know you can't be awesome on your own, but that's not what I'm asking you to do. He's going to plant himself in you and he's going to make you awesome. So that tension is still there, which is right. My American Christianity, or what James seems to be saying, can I be perfect now? And I don't like that question because I think no, but like also God should be able to. Like if I let him, but like, will I let him? Like how much? But also, here's how I think of it. So we've been talking about intimacy and reproduction. And I think that's what worship is. It's what we say all the time. It's a life. It's a life of intimacy and reproduction with the Lord. I know it's a bit of an interesting way to talk about it, but God talks about himself like that all the time. And I forgot exactly where I was going with that. Shoot, what was I saying? I know it was going to be great. It was going to be your favorite. It was. It was. Oh, love. Love. You know why? One of the reasons that for an American to say reproductive and intimate, you automatically go to sex because I think that's one of the beautiful things that sex does is teaches us about the relationship we have with God. That's why it's been given to married people who also teach us about what it is to be with God. And so the whole perfect thing. Well, I don't know how that works, but you lived your whole life with your spouse. You did it. You did. Good job, you. You loved them beginning to end. You met in high school. You fell in love. In high school, were you finished with that relationship? No, but it was going to be finished one day. And then when you look back on it, it's perfect. But if you date that guy and then he breaks up with you or like cheats on you when you look back on that memory, it's not perfect anymore. So sometimes perfection is held in what will happen, but hasn't happened yet. Eh? Eh? Definitely are. Mike?
We tend to think that perfect is now and always.
Say that again.
And we tend to think that perfect is now and always has been, always will be, with no deviation whatsoever. God, I believe, the scripture teaches very clearly that while that is true, we can't possibly do that. He can.
Right.
And he can make us that way.
Yeah.
To where it becomes true. It is not true, and yet it can become true. And I believe that's one of the reasons why God actually talks about his people becoming adulterous, because there is a perfect way, a perfect relationship, and anything that we don't allow God to do in that becomes an imperfect relationship, especially if we begin to go elsewhere.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's all. That's the only thought I have so far on the whole perfect thing. Can we be perfect now? Well, when the example I used, dating your high school boyfriend, did you fight? Was he an idiot? Were you crabby? Yeah, of course. But because how it ended, because it was full, because it was what it was supposed to be, those memories are precious and beautiful and perfect. So I think it's going to work kind of like that. I think two things about that. One, that if we could truly see and understand the Lord for who he was, we would love him. I don't think a human could not without lies present about who he is and what he is. I don't think it's possible. And I think that's partly what it means is he chose to give us birth through the word of truth so that we could be that kind of first fruits of all he created. We have to know the truth. And if we knew it fully, we'd love him. We wouldn't have a choice. It would just happen. Therefore, the closer we draw to the Lord and the closer he draws to us, the more we can love him. And whether that'll get us perfect now or not, I don't know. But I do believe fully that one day we will be that kind of perfect. That was like, yes, you were a pain and annoying sinner, but gosh, look at us now, or look, it'll be great one day. So, okay. That's what I think we learned about holiness from this ask and answer section in James, that you have to behave as though he can, wants to, and will do what he says, that he's the only place to get good, and we have to deal with that. And what was the other one I had? It was so good. Oh, only reproduce with the Lord. Okay. Thanks.